Breaking news, the U.S. military hits ISIS with the mother of all bombs. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. The massive weapon is the largest non-nuclear bomb the military has ever used in combat. Only used in testing. Today it was deployed in Afghanistan for the very first time. President Trump praising the mission, but the commander-in-chief won't say whether he's the one who gave the green light. And we have more breaking news. Sources telling CNN that British intelligence and other European agencies intercepted communications between Trump associates and Russian officials during the campaign and passed them on to U.S. officials. We will bring you the very latest on all of this. Well, let's begin with the military targeting ISIS in Afghanistan. I want to bring in CNN Chief National Security Correspondent, that's Jim Sciutto, military analyst, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, and Lieutenant Colonel Rick Francona. Good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Jim, you first, the mother of all bombs. It's the largest non-nuclear bomb, as I said, the U.S. has ever used in combat. The president is calling it a success. Let's take a look first.
If you look at what's happened over the last 8 weeks and compare that really to what's happened over the last 8 years, you'll see there's a tremendous difference, So we have incredible leaders in the military, and we have incredible military, and we are very proud of them. And this was another very, very successful mission.
And, Jim, it's important to note here that this is the second major military strike by the Trump administration in a week.
That's exactly right. The mother of all bombs, that's actually the nickname. It's actually an acronym for a massive ordnance air blast. It's a bomb designed to actually explode before it hits the ground, but then destroy underground structures, tunnels, etc. It's huge, biggest under a nuclear bomb, but let's be clear, it's about a thousandth, 1/1000th of the size of a smaller nuclear weapon. So this is not close to a nuclear weapon, but it's a big conventional weapon. And beyond destroying underground structures, one of the functions is really to demoralize enemy forces. It shakes the ground like an earthquake for miles around, and that's one of the functions here. Does it measurably change the battle against ISIS in a country like Afghanistan, where there are many places to hide, etc.? No, but a show of force. And I don't think, Don, you could discount the possibility that this is a message intended not only for ISIS there, but for other countries that have underground military facilities. Think of North Korea, perhaps, right, where there's discussion of a possible underground nuclear blast. Not that you would use this particular weapon against it, but again, a show of force for that theater, but I think also for around the world.
General Hertling, let's continue our conversation. Let's talk a little bit more about this bomb. The U.S. military has had this nearly 22,000 pound bomb since the early 2000s, but this was the first time that this Moab, or mother of all bombs, has been used in combat. Was this the right bomb for the right target? I mean, these ISIS tunnels in eastern Afghanistan?
Yeah, it was exactly the right bomb, Don. Yeah, I was actually in the Pentagon when this thing was developed, and we kiddingly called it the mother of all bombs because this was about the time when we had Baghdad Bobs and we were about to have the mother of all battles. So the Air Force kind of came up with this term. It is the perfect weapon, and General Nicholson, who I know very well, chose the perfect weapon for this facility. The reason why, this is an area in Nangarhar province, is a perfect area for dropping this kind of bomb. It's rocky, it's hilly, it has a lot of gorges. The overpressure will collapse those tunnels. It doesn't penetrate the ground. This is not a penetrator. They have another bomb much larger than that one to do that if you need this to get underground. But it has a concussive effect, and it collapses the tunnel. This is also a bad guy area, to be sure. This has been giving the Afghan forces and the Americans in the area problems for over a decade, this Nangarhar province area. But this particular bomb, this GBU-43 as it's called, replaced another one from the Vietnam era called a daisy cutter. And, you know, when you're talking about a commander, and I'm going to channel some of my former combat commander status on this, you literally look, when you target areas, it's something called a joint munitions employment manual. It's a guide for your targeteers to say, this is the target, this is the kind of situation we have, what kind of weapons should we drop on this? This is a perfect kind of thing. It's a tactical system, though, and we shouldn't get all breathless about this being something that President Trump ordered, because this was something the commander on the scene wanted to drop in this area.
Oh, that's interesting. You should say that then, Francona. This goes perfectly, because the president wouldn't say if he greenlit using this bomb. Here's exactly how he responded when asked.
Everybody knows exactly what happened, so And what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization.
So, Colonel, I need to tell you that sources are telling CNN that General John Nicholson, commander of the U.S. forces in Afghanistan, signed off on this. But the White House was informed of the plan ahead of time. Here's a question. Realistically, a bomb with the nickname Mother of All Bombs, something this big, the largest non-nuclear bomb ever dropped in combat, would that happen without the direct sign-off of the commander-in-chief?
I think so, and that's what sources at the Pentagon are telling us. We were, talking about this earlier today. The president has authorized the theater commander and also the commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan to employ these weapons as a tactical weapon. I think General was very clear on that. This is a tactical weapon. This is not a strategic weapon. This is not a nuclear weapon. This is not a chemical weapon. This is a tactical weapon. We could have dropped 1,000 pounds, 1,000-pound bombs and have the same force. It wouldn't have the same psychological effect, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it doesn't require that high of a level of sign-off. As General Hertling said, the JMEM tells you what effect ammunition will have on a particular target. You use that guide. You say, this is the target. This is the effect I want to have. This is the weapon that will do it. This is the weapon, and it's the perfect weapon for this one location.
Jim Sciutto, a senior administration official, is saying that they don't approve every strike and that, quote, this administration has moved further away from dictating military strategy from the White House. What about civilian control of the military?
Well, that's a question. And listen, the commander-in-chief is still the commander-in-chief, but I do think, I don't know that there's been a dramatic constitutional change here, but you are seeing what appears to be a relaxing of the process. The Obama administration was famous, perhaps notorious, for how many hoops the military had to jump through to approve strikes. And that was a headache. I spent a lot of time in the Pentagon, and that was often a frustration there. On the flip side, though, the reason behind that was a desire to minimize civilian casualties. And to be fair, if you look in the last several weeks, there have been a number of strikes. And listen, this happens all the time. It's risky to drop bombs in areas, wherever you're doing it. But you've had a number of strikes in the last several weeks. You had a bomb in Mosul. You had friendly forces struck in Syria in the last 24 hours. You had the use of this weapon. So there is evidence, maybe not conclusive yet, but there's evidence that the military has more leeway to use weapons, and I'd ask the generals here and Lieutenant Colonel Francona to see if they agree. It appears they've been given more leeway to push the limits a bit and increase that risk of collateral damage.
Yeah, shake of the head. I think they agree with that. You agree with that?
I'm not buying that, Don. I got to jump in because having been in combat, knowing what commanders go through to get strikes and knowing the conscience that commanders live under when they're striking targets, yeah, there may be fewer rules in terms of the processes, but they are still going to look very closely at collateral damage. As a commander, you don't want the death of innocents on your conscience. The other thing is this comment by the president saying we've done more in the last 8 weeks than we've done in the last 8 years. That to me is insulting. There have been a lot of people fighting hard in many theaters, and just because there's been a couple of big bomb drops and a tomahawk strike in Syria, we're saying that we're doing more in 8 weeks than ever before. That's just wrong, and it's incorrect.
Hey, Don, just so I could interject, because Mark knows me well, I certainly don't mean to intimate that the generals are suddenly not concerned about civilian casualties by any means, because I spent a lot of time with the military and I know that the care that they go through in the command centers to do that. But if we look at the evidence, it just raises a question that is worth asking. And we do know that there was frustration with the decision-making process under the Obama administration. Has that changed? We'll have to see.
Quickly, Colonel, can you wrap it up for us?
Well, I keep asking that question. I talk to a lot of people at different levels in the chain of command, and I get the answer that no, the rules haven't changed. So they say it hasn't, but it sure looks like it does. So I'm not exactly sure. So I take Jim's point.
Yeah. All right. We'll continue to investigate. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, General Hertling. I appreciate it, Colonel Francona. Jim, I want you to stick around because I understand you have some breaking news tonight on the Russia investigation. And Jim, you and our CNN colleagues came out with some new reporting about the Trump campaign and Russia. What can you tell us?
I'll tell you, you may remember CNN was the first to report some weeks ago that U.S. intelligence had captured repeated conversations between advisors and associates of the Trump campaign and Russian officials and other Russian nationals known to U.S. intelligence. The NSA and others had intercepted those communications. What we learned today is that British intelligence and other European intelligence agencies picked up similar conversations, again between Russian officials, others known to Western intelligence, and people associated with the Trump campaign. So what's significant about that is not just one intelligence service that was picking up this kind of back and forth. It was our allies, the UK and others, who were then seeing it as significant enough to then share with their partner, the U.S. And it adds into this bigger picture, which is, we know, still the subject of an active investigation of the FBI and the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, is what do these communications mean? And one open question has not been established yet. Does that indicate that there was some sort of cooperation or collusion between some people in the Trump orbit and Russian nationals as they were interfering in the U.S. election? That's not established yet, but the communications are material to that investigation.
So we are not aware of the nature of any of these communications and what they reveal about the Trump team, just to be precise here.
We don't know, for instance, the content of the transcripts. It is just the fact that they happened, the frequency with which they happened, and that European intelligence agencies considered them important enough that they shared them with their American allies.
Okay, so Mitch, the British intelligence agencies, do we know if they were specifically targeting members of the Trump team?
No, and it's a good question because, as you know, Donald Trump accused President Obama of using Britain, tasking British intelligence with spying on Trump and his campaign. That's not how this happened. And I've spoken to European intelligence. This is what's called incidental collection. The Europeans, just like the Americans, are regularly monitoring the communications, particularly of U.S. adversaries overseas, and that certainly includes Russia. Sometimes, when they're monitoring those communications, they pick up on the other end of the line an American, or they pick up Russians talking about an American. When that happens, the U.S. takes notice, certainly, but so do our allies. And this is a case where, incidentally, they picked up these communications. They said, listen, Russians are talking to Trump associates, etc. We felt it was important to share it with you, and you then look at it and decide what you're going to do with it.
So, do we know, why didn't our U.S. intelligence agencies, why did they not capture it? Or maybe they did.
They did. And we reported that earlier. So
is this duplicate?
Several intelligence agencies now have done that. U.S., British, and other European intelligence agencies. So it wasn't just one who happened to pick up this kind of back and forth. It was several.
Okay. So are these duplicates, or the same communications being captured by British, by European intelligence agencies, U.S. intelligence agencies, and others, or is this? Listen,
it's possible some are duplicates, but you have to imagine, and some of this is the nature of cooperation between these countries, where, for instance, the Five Eyes program, which you have sharing of intelligence between the U.S., Europe, and other allies. They will task certain countries' intelligence services with focusing on certain parts of the world. Doesn't mean that the U.S. isn't operating there, but part of Britain's responsibility is focusing on Russian communications. So the British might pick up things that the U.S. would not.
Jim, I have a short time here, but how might this affect the investigations that are going on now?
We don't know yet, but they're certainly going to look at it. I spoke today with a source close to the Senate intelligence investigation. They said, listen, if these conversations are relevant to our investigation, we're going to take a hard look at them.
Jim Sciutto, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, a closer look at the investigation and what this could mean for the Trump administration going forward. Breaking news, sources telling CNN that British intelligence and other European agencies intercepted communications between Trump associates and Russian officials during the campaign and passed them on to U.S. officials. Let's discuss now CNN's Fareed Zakaria here, the host of Fareed Zakaria GPS, and Robin Wright, joint fellow at the U.S. Institute of Peace and Woodrow Wilson Center. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start with you. Get your reaction. Jim Sciutto was just on reporting that foreign intelligence officials passed along information to the FBI and the CIA about Trump associates' contacts with Russians. What do you think?
Look, I think we're getting the same picture from a number of sources over a number of days, and it all points to, frankly, one of two possibilities. Either the Trump campaign was an extremely disorderly, chaotic, and somewhat corrupt affair with a lot of grifters, freelancers, trolling in various ways and interacting and intersecting with all kinds of strange characters, including people associated with Russian intelligence, the Russian government, or there is some actual connection and collusion. But it does seem strange. If you assume the first, which is more benign, that there was an actual collusion, the number of times that the Trump campaign associates, affiliates, seem to have had some kind of contact or bumped up against some kind of Russian. Somebody noticed, somebody watched, the British, the FBI. If this is a coincidence, it's a remarkable coincidence.
Yeah, and Robin, some of this came from the British. You'll recall that the president created a diplomatic incident when he claimed that the British had tapped his phones in Trump Tower at the former President Barack Obama's request. But they say that this communication was picked up during incidental collection, during routine surveillance of known Russian targets. That's different, just as it happened with the U.S. That's different, right?
Absolutely, and the deniability of the evidence becomes ever harder. The pressure now will grow on Congress to investigate even deeper. The layers of this keep adding, and I think there'll be more and more questions. Over the past week, the administration has gained from the fact that the focus has shifted to foreign policy in Syria and then Afghanistan. But, long term, this is something that will haunt the administration. And I think it at some point has to either come clean, try to help facilitate answers, because I think the American public really wants this issue to go away.
Haunt why? How?
I mean, how to pressure them?
No, how will it haunt the administration?
Oh, I think the idea that that some of its personnel were engaged with Russia will come back to haunt this administration, particularly given the kind of tensions we have with Russia that were apparent this week when Secretary of State Rex Tillerson visited Moscow, had his meeting with Vladimir Putin and the foreign minister. This is a time that they're trying to sort out a number of very significant issues, and to have this haunt the administration, I think is going to be very difficult.
I think part of what Robin is saying is it feels to me the Trump administration does not have a strategy to deal with this. You don't get the feeling that they have figured out, okay, this is a problem, and here's what we are going to do. Here are the two people who are the point people for this. Here's all the, they're going to answer all these questions. They're going to do their own internal review. They're going to have some statements to make. Instead, what you get is this is drip, drip, drip of information, reporting, congressional inquiries that keeps coming in. And as Robin was saying, what it does is it keeps diverting the narrative from anything that the Trump administration wants to present. And every now and then, yes, the Syria strike will divert it, but then you get back to the next.
Back to it because the next going like this, right? There's not a straight line.
And
because the original tweet was something that is completely different to what this has evolved into, and not a natural evolution. It's a forced evolution.
You would think that somebody in the White House, the chief of staff, frankly, should be tasked with saying, how are we dealing with this? What is our response to it? Who is the point person? What is the internal investigation? Some kind of political and communication strategy, and instead you feel as though there's nothing other than an occasional defensive tweet from the commander-in-chief.
Well, I think that they realize that it is a weakness, and so
still you've got to have a strategy for weaknesses as well as strengths.
Do you think that British intelligence or European intelligence, Robin, would give us everything that they have? Because I tried to sort of get Jim Sciutto to break this down specifically. Were these duplicates? Was this new communications? Would they give us everything that they have?
They haven't given it to me, so I don't know. But I suspect they gave us they provided a good bit of information. And I think there's a sense in the international community that they want to see this issue resolved as well. They want to see how deep these connections go and what it means. I think there's a discomfort generally among many of our allies about what happened in this election, because the Europeans also face the same kind of issue with the Russians in terms of their meddling in, for example, the French or the German elections. And so there are a lot of questions that play out among our allies as well as in Washington.
Does this mean that other world leaders would know about these contacts and the nature of them, Robin?
Absolutely. You have to believe that whether it's Angela Merkel or in Germany or Theresa May in Britain, that a lot of them know exactly what their intelligence agencies picked up and what may have been happening, what interference the Russians have engaged in when it came to the United States. And I think this is, this is you know, we talk about a new Cold War with the Russians. There's a lot at stake on this issue. It's not just what happened in the run-up to our election. This is what broader Russian intentions are, how it's engaging, how much we can engage with them. So the stakes are huge on this issue.
Yeah, and then of course, the narrative now is being twisted, and that's really, can we have a free and fair electoral process or election process in this country without the Russians or foreign countries' enemies?
And can any democracy?
Yeah, absolutely. Stick around, everyone. Stick around, Fareed and Rob. When we come back, more on the mother of all bombs. We're going to break down what message the blast could send to other countries President Trump has targeted. We're back now, and we've been talking about our breaking news on the investigation into the Trump administration in Russia. And now to our other big breaking news story, the U.S. military dropping what's called the mother of all bombs on ISIS targets in Afghanistan. The first time a weapon of this type has been used in battle by the Pentagon. Back with me now, Fareed Zakaria and Robin Wright. Fareed, how surprised are you that 12 weeks into this presidency that we dropped one of the largest bombs that we have on Afghanistan, other than a nuclear bomb?
Well, it doesn't surprise me in the sense that I don't think it represents some kind of dramatic change in the political or military strategy. It does seem, from what one can tell, that the military was right that this was a particularly appropriate bomb given what they were facing, which was a lot of tunnels, and it was difficult to get at this stuff. But I think it does raise a bigger issue that I bet you many Americans and people around the world who watch this program, you know, were reminded of. 16 years after 9/11, we are still fighting a war in Afghanistan. This is the longest war in American history. There are, I think, 8,000 or 9,000 American troops.
And is that why General Hertling was so offended by the president saying, "Oh, we've done more in 8 weeks than we've done in the last 8 years"?
I think so. This has been a steady slog for a long time, but it reminds you, you know, you can drop a lot of these bombs. What is the political strategy? What is the political objective?
Syria, of Afghanistan.
Right, of all these places, exactly. And the only way we're going to achieve a measure of success is if we have some kind of political settlement on the ground, right? That there's somebody there who has legitimacy and power and can take it over.
Yeah.
Otherwise, 16 years from now, we will still be talking on this program about dropping these bombs.
All right, so that's strategy, but does it send a message, Robin Wright? And the president was asked about this earlier, about North Korea as well. Here's the president.
I don't know if this sends a message. It doesn't make any difference if it does or not. North Korea is a problem. The problem will be taken care of.
Okay, so no strategy mentioning there, except that the problem will be taken care of. So, to Fareed's point, how will North Korea, Iran, and other countries view this action?
Well, I think that this bomb was actually dropped because of the conditions on the ground, what opportunities that were provided by wherever the ISIS fighters were, whether it has repercussions militarily or psychologically in North Korea, Iran, Syria, Iraq. Maybe, but, you know, I don't necessarily think that it's going to be decisive. I think a lot of these places will have their own strategies and will continue, whether it's what North Korea does in the next couple of days with launching a 6th nuclear test. But I do think Fareed's right. I just came back from Iraq, and I think the thing that haunts all of us who are involved in covering these wars and have been for decades is that there is not a strategy beyond dropping bombs to find a way out of these wars, to end the military environment. All of the military experts you've had on the show will certainly agree that, yes, you can go after and use whatever weaponry, sophisticated weaponry you have to intimidate or kill the opposition, your enemy, but you have to, at the end of the day, have a strategy, a complementary, parallel strategy that comes up with a means to, whether it's find peace in Afghanistan after 6 years, in dealing with the Taliban. When I was in Mosul in Iraq, you know, there is a sense of how you provide military security for Mosul, but there's no plan for the political governance in a way that will make all the parties on the ground feel that they are invested in the process and they don't want to sign up for the next iteration of Al-Qaeda or ISIS or whatever's next. That there are these big questions that nobody is answering. The Trump administration, most of all. You know, the Obama administration, the Bush administrations both grappled with these issues, never got in 8 years with each of them to that incredible nexus of political or diplomatic and military operations. And there's a deep concern that for all the bombs that have been dropped in the past week, the Trump administration is as far away, if not further away from that as well.
I want to ask you, Fareed, because Senator Lindsey Graham, he's been critical of this administration. He said, I hope America's adversaries are watching and now understand there is a new sheriff in town. Is he right?
Not really. I think that, again, to Mark Hertling's point, we've been doing this for a while. In fact, President Obama dropped more did more drone strikes, I think, in his first 2 years than George Bush had done in all 8 years of his presidency. Obama has actually been very comfortable using drones, using bombs, using special forces. I think that the real challenge, again, is not the military. The United States has never lost or gone astray in these engagements because it has lacked military power, firepower. We've won every battle.
That's political rhetoric.
The problem is, what do you then do? How do you then stabilize the situation? Because if you don't stabilize it, you leave and the bad guys come back. And it's that dynamic of figuring out, think about Iraq. We went in, smashed a lot of stuff, but we weren't able to create some kind of political dynamic that was stable and successful. Same in Afghanistan. It's been better than Iraq, but that's the difficulty. And I wonder whether Donald Trump will come to realize this, because his national security advisor, McMaster, is actually one of the world's experts at this. How do you actually stabilize a place politically after you've bombed it? The bombing, the U.S. does it very well. It does it better than anyone in the world. It did it well under Obama. It did it well under Bush. It'll do it well under Trump. Yeah. The question is, what do you do after the bombs?
Nation building is what we call it.
You know what? It is nation building, and Trump has been unalterably opposed to that. Yeah. And McMaster and Petraeus and people like that believe in it because they believe it's the only way to stabilize. Yeah. And so you say, well, Trump won't do it, except that this week Trump has reversed himself on 6 different things. Maybe that'll be the 7th thing he'll reverse himself.
Fascinating conversation. Thank you, Fareed. Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it. When we come back, more on the investigation into Trump associates' ties with Russian officials, plus what one of Trump's former foreign policy advisors is now saying about his own communications with Russians.